So let's talk about wanting an A team. I think running a business, speaking from experience, is the toughest thing you'll ever do, but it can be so much harder if you are not surrounded by the best possible people that you can afford. I get really frustrated, guys, when we go into businesses and they say, we're looking to exit a non-performer. And we say, so how long's George or Mary not been performing? And they'll go, oh, about 5 years. What? This is costing you a fortune, which I'm going to share with you in a moment. I'm going to take you through a model now. This is our employee commitment model. So we've run this model with hundreds of businesses. And what we know is that businesses or employees typically come to an organization with a level of capability and a level of engagement, say emotional engagement with the business. It might be also called motivation. And that usually ranges from low to high and also low to high for capability. When we work with someone who's low in engagement and low in capability, they're actually a prisoner in the business. If you don't like the titles, just take away what I'm explaining here and you can call them A, C, and D players if that is more comfortable for you. But these prisoners in the workplace, they are trapped. They are stuck. They have no way out. And guess what? They're not leaving your business at the moment because they don't think they're going to find another job. And they neither have the capacity or the interest in trying to drive hard for your business. The next one we have is what we call conscripts. These are interesting. We see people who have a high level of capability but a low level of engagement, and we think of them as conscripts. And conscripts are what we call cleverly antagonistic. They're not interested in the business in order to contribute to you as a manager or the business, and they're not interested really in other people in the business. They're in it for themselves. In fact, they're in uniform and they fight the battle, but as soon as you turn their back, they are gone. On the other side here, and can be interestingly equally problematic, is someone who's got a really high level of engagement but low levels of capability. We think of these as trainees. I call them super keen and super green. Another way of thinking about them is that they're enthusiastically vulnerable. They're easily swayed. Prisoners will try and grab them across to be allies with them, if you like. And if they don't know any better, the trainees can end up very quickly in the prisoner quadrant. When what we're aiming for is actually this last group here, which is what we call volunteers. Volunteers are people who step up every single day and do everything they can to drive the business forward. And sadly, what we do know is many businesses don't have always a lot of these people in this organization. But there's one more group, and that's what we call the superstars in your business. They're the ones that are trying to drive your business forward. Our goal is to try and have as many of these in the business as possible. And these are the people that if I was to walk into your business and I was to ask 10 random people who are the top performers in the business, they would pretty much all say the same person or people. They are the rock stars in your business. So I want you to have a think about your business or your team, and I'd like you to divide it between the left and the right hand side with what percentage of your team would you say are in the left versus the right, and then put percentages in each quadrant. What would that look like? And then just put that down on your notes. Imagine if you just realized that 5 of your team are actually prisoners or conscripts. What do? Well, the reality is you need to performance manage them to get them back to being volunteers, or maybe they were never volunteers, they were a hiring mistake, or you need to manage them out the door, but make sure you performance manage them compliantly. Interestingly, some recent research from Gallup said that 60%, this is global, 60% of the global workforce can be termed as not engaged. That's really, really concerning because it means they're also prime candidates for quiet quitting, which a lot of our HR people on this call will probably be very familiar with that term. But despite constituting a majority, this forgotten about group is a bit like they're getting the least amount of attention, but they're a bit like a middle child, as middle kids might say. I think it's really important that you know where your employees are at. If they are quiet quitting, you're going to have some productivity issues as a result. Now we're clear, and I'd love you to be thinking. I often find when I do this with clients, they go, oh, Fred's a prisoner and George is a volunteer or a star. So now we're clear about that. I want you to be really honest with yourself. How many of your employees are sitting in the right-hand quadrant? And you might ask yourself where you sit, and you could vary. Like some days it's tough. You might feel like you're a trainee because you're having to learn stuff, and then you're being back to being a volunteer. Now I'm going to share with you what it's costing to have non-performers, which generally that left-hand side of the quadrants, and you might want to think about making some tough decisions. So let's talk about proactive performance management. Did you know that it's costing you 34% of the salary of a non-performer to have them in your business? Reality check. It might be time to exit. We call it managed attrition versus unmanaged, which is where they're having resignations. Incidentally, we're seeing a number of companies that are not replacing people who are resigning. And that strategy can work on a temporary basis, but not if the person who is exiting is key to the production of revenue or is going to impact the ability of others in the business to optimize their productivity. So exiting non-performance. What I do know, and many of you are probably sitting there going, that's me, is that many managers and business owners alike lack the confidence, the experience, and the skills to exit employees around misconduct or non-performance. My tip here is to have really strong probation assessments and exits during the probation period as the risk is significantly lower. Please, please, please don't use a redundancy as the soft option as opposed to exiting due to performance. The most common mistakes we see here are around the process. For example, not offering to have a support person or not giving the individual sufficient training or every chance to improve. The other thing I'd love you to think about here is culture. When organizations have a great culture, two things happen. And if you guys can guess ahead of me, jump in. They attract the best talent in the marketplace. There is a reason why there's a queue of people lining up at Atlassian to work for them. They retain their best talent. And remember, attrition is really expensive. It costs between 50 and 150% on top of base salary to hire. So you don't want to be getting this wrong. Systems. This is where I see a lot of businesses are not investing sufficiently in their tech and systems. Digitization is no longer optional. One area is that businesses can really reap a return on their investment and build efficiencies into their businesses is in investing in or an expanded use of a HRIS system, human resource information system. Nicole in our team is doing more and more of these implementations. So think Employment Hero, Elmo, IntelliHR, those types of things. I think it's really important here that what we're finding is organizations are going, look, that'd be great. I need one of those systems, but they don't have the internal capacity or capability to roll it out very well. And therefore you're not getting your ROI. You really want to make sure that investment is delivering for you, and it should be giving you great data and able to make more data-informed decisions. So I think that's really important. So get that ROI. The next one is hybrid workforce. I think we did an amazing job of moving to working from home overnight. But where we still struggle and have struggled is teaching our managers to manage a remote team. The second issue here is there's real tension at the moment, I would say, between employers really wanting their employees to return to the workplace full-time, that's the office, or partial return. And I would suggest to you that employees are incredibly resistant to this. We have candidates that actually ask to see the working from home policy before they even agree to go to an interview. So, and I think there's some other interesting stuff here. Our friends at Parents at Work did a National Families Working Report, and 83% are more likely not to apply for a different job that didn't offer flexibility. So invest in writing a working from home policy that works for your organization and for the best talent out there, because they not only want it, they expect it. The other thing I think we need to be thinking about is being prepared for the turn. According to Elmo's HR industry benchmark survey, there's a lack of training out there. So for example, in Australian businesses at the moment, they're lucky to have $2,000 a year spent on their training. Now, training is often the first expense that gets cut during tough economic times, but it can be a little bit short-sighted if you're building and wanting to retain an A team and increasing productivity. We need to be super careful that if we're reducing that investment, that we also don't lose those superstar employees. And the other thing that we need to be thinking about here in preparation for the return is if we cut too hard in a redundancy or we let too many people go through resignation, that when the market turns, and it will particularly or usually turns pretty quickly when it's been a deliberate suppression, we're going to find it difficult to recruit in a very tight applicant market when all of your competitors are recruiting as well. That's when talent pools might be useful. So there is a second reason. If you're budgeting in FY25, make sure you put your employees first. Invest in that A team. Who is your staff? Who is your volunteers? Are you working out how you can retain them? Are you doing stay interviews rather than exit interviews? And have a plan in place to retain them. But for the ones that are your prisoners and conscripts, conscripts, make sure that you've got a plan in place to get them to lift their game or compliantly exit them from the business. So back for you to do some thinking, guys. I want you to action now. I want you to estimate the number of prisoners and conscripts in your team or business and work out if you've got any stars. And, go back to that 34% of salary. If you've got 5 people who are prisoners and they're paid 100 grand, you're wasting $34,000 a year times 5. So it is really important that you're doing this well.